Welcome to the latest instalment of History Mysteries, where I talk about interesting and little known facts covering historical happenings from ancient times through to modern history. More famous in death than in life, today's history mystery is Who Killed Amy Dudley? Amy Dudley died in very suspicious circumstances, and due to the position of her husband Robert Dudley in the court of Elizabeth I, her death generated substantial scandal. If you think that the current British royal family has issues, welcome to the Elizabethan era and to the court of Queen Elizabeth I. Before we get to the actual scandal, let's get the backstory on Robert and Amy Dudley. Amy Dudley was born Amy Robsart in 1532, the daughter of Sir John Robsart, a gentleman farmer from Norfolk, England, who had considerable wealth and local influence. Just after Amy's 17th birthday, she met Robert Dudley, and they married the next year in 1550. Robert Dudley, portrayed by Joseph Fiennes and Tom Hardy in these fetching outfits, was the fifth son of John Dudley, the Duke of Northumberland. The family had had considerable influence in the royal court for several generations. When Robert and Amy met in 1549, Robert's father, the Duke of Northumberland, was effectively ruling England due to his position as the leader of the ruling council for young King Edward VI. So, apart from some increased influence in Norfolk through Amy's father, there was little to be gained by Robert and Amy's match, and it was generally held that their relationship was a love match. Indeed, at their marriage on the 5th of June 1550, which was a grand court occasion attended even by the young King Edward VI and the Princess Elizabeth, one of the wedding guests, William Cecil, is reported to have called it a carnal marriage. The early days of their married life were spent in Norfolk. However, Robert's father, the Duke, increasingly took Robert to the royal court in London, leaving Amy at their country home. In July 1553, the young King, Edward VI, died, and the Dudley family sought to install Lady Jane Grey on the English throne. For a marriage just 6 weeks earlier, Robert's elder brother, Guildford Dudley, was now the husband of Lady Jane Grey, and so the Duke would have considerable influence on this new queen. The reign of Lady Jane Grey lasted for just 9 days before Mary was installed as queen. But before we move on, let's just note that, for 9 days, England had a King Guildford. In the aftermath of this, Lady Jane and poor Guildford were executed, as was the Duke of Northumberland. Robert Dudley was also condemned to death, and was imprisoned in the Tower of London, a stay which also coincided with the Princess Elizabeth being taken there after a rebellion the following year. Many have speculated that this is where the childhood friendship of Robert and Elizabeth developed into something more. Robert and his remaining brothers would be released that autumn, although Mary had confiscated all their property and titles. After Mary died, Queen Elizabeth came to the throne in 1558, and she gave Robert a position at court as Master of the Queen's Horse. Now I know that sounds like head of the stables, but it was an important court position, allowing close attendance on the Queen, helping her onto her horse and accompanying her on rides. He was also asked to arrange her coronation. Elizabeth gave land and other honours to Robert, including making him the Earl of Leicester. It became an open secret at court that the Queen was attracted to Robert. So let's return to the scandal of Amy's death. Robert and Amy had had no children, and he was now absent at court for long periods. They did not meet frequently, and the Spanish ambassador even wrote to the King of Spain that Lord Robert has come so much into favour that he does whatever he likes with affairs, and it is even said that Her Majesty visits him in his chamber day and night. People talk of this so frequently that they go so far as to say his wife has a malady in one of her breasts, and that the Queen is only waiting for her to die to marry Lord Robert. Dudley visited his wife for Easter 1559, and also saw her for a brief period in London over that summer. He would not see her again. So when Amy died in September 1560, that meant that Dudley could marry the Queen, right? Well, no, because Amy's death was just suspicious enough that everyone had questions, and to this day, historians aren't sure exactly what happened. But here are some theories. Theory 1. It was an accident. Lady Amy Dudley was completely alone on the 8th of September 1560. She had insisted, quite angrily, that all of her household staff go out to a fair. The coroner's verdict was that Lady Dudley, being alone, accidentally fell precipitously down the stairs to the very bottom. She had sustained 2 head injuries, one the depth of a quarter of a thumb, the other the depth of 2 thumbs. She had also, by reason of the accidental injury or of that fall, and of Lady Amy's own body weight falling down the aforesaid stairs, broke her neck. Theory 2. It was suicide. If we accept that Amy was suffering from breast cancer, and lived in a time where that could only be discovered when she had had a large visible lump for quite some time, it is possible that she took her own life. Dudley's manservant was quoted at the time saying that Dudley hoped it was an accident, but feared it was suicide. The biggest evidence in favour of this was Amy's insistence in sending away her servants, as seen by the testimony at the inquest. However, by the time the inquest was held, that is, the investigation into her death by local magistrates, it was clear that Robert Dudley did not want a verdict of suicide to be recorded. There are 2 main reasons he would have wanted this. The first is that he thought people would claim that his relationship with Queen Elizabeth had driven Amy to take her own life. However, Dudley would also be concerned about the impact of this verdict on Amy's reputation. During the Tudor period, a very religious time, suicide was considered a grave sin. If Amy were declared to have taken her own life, she would have been denied a Christian burial and instead laid to rest in unconsecrated ground without religious ceremony. Theory 3. Robert murdered her, with or without Elizabeth's knowledge. The first printed account of Amy's alleged murder appeared some 24 years after her death. The pamphlet, Leicester's Commonwealth, written by Catholic exiles in the 1580s, was aimed at reducing the power and reputation of Robert, clear from the title calling England Leicester's, as the Earl of Leicester was Robert's title. In this account, they said that Robert sent a manservant directly to the house, and that this man had forced the servants to go to the market, before breaking Amy's neck and placing her at the foot of the stairs. The article goes on to allege that Robert then murdered the manservant in prison. The pamphlet said, falsely, that the inquest had declared Amy's death a murder. Whilst this is the first written evidence of such a theory, it is clear there was gossip along these lines immediately after her death. The biggest flaw in this theory is if Robert, with or without Elizabeth's knowledge, did this so they could get married, why didn't they then get married? Theory 4. Murder by Elizabeth's minister. One other suggestion is that William Cecil organised Amy Dudley's death. William Cecil, who was Elizabeth's Secretary of State, basically her Prime Minister, disliked the influence Dudley had over Elizabeth and feared it would only increase if Robert and Elizabeth were to marry. Everyone knew Amy was dying. The Spanish ambassador had even mentioned it in diplomatic letters back to Spain, and so it is theorised, with the benefit of hindsight, that if Amy's death was sufficiently suspicious, Robert and Elizabeth could never marry, and Cecil's position as Elizabeth's main political adviser would not be threatened. However, this theory suffers from historians' fallacy, assuming that people are aware of all the consequences of an act in deciding what to do. Cecil would have been committing an immense risk in killing an innocent woman to prevent her widower from marrying the Queen. After an appropriate period of mourning, Robert would have been free to marry Elizabeth, and they were both still young enough to produce heirs. A few modern historians have considered murder as an option, but this is now impossible to prove by the distance of time. Who knows what really happened that day? It may well be that Cecil had a hand in her death, for the reasons I have mentioned. Power is a great motivator, and he certainly had the motive and the connections. I do not think Dudley or Elizabeth were involved. If they were so motivated, they could have used the official inquest verdict of an accident to progress their relationship after a suitable mourning period. And so to the sliding door moment and its impact on the English monarchy and indeed the United Kingdom. How different would England be if, after his wife's death, Robert and Elizabeth had indeed married and produced an heir? James I would probably never have come to the throne of England, and the futures of England and Scotland from 1603 onwards would have been very different. Robert would not remarry for nearly 20 years. Indeed, he would eventually marry Elizabeth's cousin Lettice, granddaughter of Mary Boleyn, made famous as the other Boleyn girl. As Catherine Carey could be the child of Henry VIII, that would make Lettice his granddaughter and Elizabeth's cousin twice over. I'm sure you can see the resemblance between Lettice and Elizabeth. I wonder if Robert saw a similar resemblance. Elizabeth would never speak to Lettice again, nor allow Robert to bring her to court or even mention her. Robert would remain a close friend and a prominent advisor and counsellor until his death in 1588. Elizabeth did not marry Robert or anyone else, and so became Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, and the rest, as they say, is history. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, let me know in the comments, and subscribe for more history mysteries. For shorter history facts and information on upcoming videos, follow me on Instagram or Tumblr, links are in the description.